Oh, you're welcome. Long time coming.
Yeah.
Okay, so I like to frame our conversation today into three sections. One, I like to look back from the lessons of the first wave that you learned, then get into sort of the present momentum of the market shifts, and then the future of Solana staking and what you see from Securitize's view.
Sure.
Okay. So let's rewind for a moment. You were in the trenches during the battle to bring the Bitcoin ETF to life, long before it was a headline. What was the single most underestimated challenge in that journey? What did it teach you about the institutional mindset towards crypto at that time?
Scott, you said this would be an easy conversation.
Well, that's after, bud.
Okay, so what was the hardest part of that? I think looking back on that experience, one, I appreciate the warm words and the introduction, but it totally overlooks the fact that this was a team effort, right? Not just the Grayscale team and everyone that, we had recruited and put together, but the industry rallied around us. We had industry groups and policy groups, and we even had sitting politicians center around this issue with us. So there was really a whole army of people supporting this initiative. I think, looking back on the experience, though, what we all never realized would be the case is that it took far longer than we ever thought it would, cost more money than we ever thought it would, and would be a lot harder of a battle than we ever thought that it would. And so, is there anything I would look back and change or do differently? I can't say that I can think of anything, because ultimately we got the outcome that we wanted. But those are probably the three things that come to mind.
In that journey, in that big battle, what would you say was the turning point that began the shift where it became into your favor or Grayscale's favor?
Well, we did some really interesting kind of guerrilla tactics to get groundswell and kind of support for what we were doing. So I remember back in the middle of this, we had to make a decision as to whether or not we wanted to start putting out advertisements, for investors to start advocating that they wanted access to a Bitcoin ETF. And so if you remember, when there's open comment letters in front of the SEC, anyone, any investor, big, small, et cetera, you can write a letter into the SEC. And so we actually took a full page advertisement out in the New York Times that was basically a templated letter that investors could either cut out of the newspaper and physically snail mail into the SEC. But we also created what I thought was really catchy at the time, which was a QR code that you could scan that would automatically open the mail client on your phone with a pre-populated email to the SEC, so that you could write a letter into them why you were in favor of them approving this kind of a proposal.
So you're saying everyone at Grayscale read the book, The Art of War?
Exactly. And I think when we started to kind of turn up the surround sound on the campaign in that kind of a way, and we started to, have milestones in the legal battle, I think that's really when people started to recognize that we were gaining momentum, and that, we were obviously had sound legal arguments, and that we were on, the right side of the law, and we were doing the right thing by investors.
I mean, I didn't realize how guerrilla warfare tactics you guys took.
Oh, yeah. I mean, those of you who have been to D.C., or those of you who haven't, the SEC building is physically attached to Union Station, Washington, D.C.'s Penn Station. So we actually took out all of the advertising. So if you were an SEC staff member or sitting, commissioner, or even the SEC chairman at the time, and were walking from the DC Metro or getting off Amtrak or whatever it was, you were passing by a, don't you deserve a Bitcoin ETF advertisement for quite some time.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, so that's great. Let's move into the present. Where's momentum, market shifts? A lot has changed since then. Bitcoin spot ETFs are now a reality. Ethereum appears to be next, but naturally, eyes are starting to turn towards the next frontier. In your view, what key characteristics will define the next wave of ETF-eligible crypto assets?
Yeah, so candidly, professionally, I've moved a little bit away from ETFs at the moment.
Yeah, of course.
But obviously keep a watchful and curious eye on the state of digital asset ETFs. So by the last count that I looked at, I think there's over 100, is that right, applications in front of the SEC for various crypto ETFs. So I think some of the big catalysts that I think will be very exciting, there are a couple of applications coming up for multi-asset ETFs. So meaning that they have, Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Solana, et cetera, inside of those products. I think that'll be a big unlock because those types of products, whether they're from asset managers like Grayscale or Bitwise or whoever is managing them, for a lot of investors, they've made the choice to allocate broadly to the space. They don't want to make singular bets on individual tokens, but instead want that broad-based exposure. So I think having those types of products in market will be a big deal. I also think that there's been a lot of recent proposals to allow people to create and redeem assets in these ETFs, the authorized participants to create and redeem in kind rather than using cash. I'm really excited to see that happen because it was always my premonition that when the big banks and those that participate in the primary market of ETFs have the ability to create and redeem in kind, it would kind of be the final thing that forced their hands to set up the pipes to touch and trade digital assets directly. So I think that'll happen. And then certainly staking as well, right? I think that whether it's Ethereum, whether it's Solana, whether it's other digital assets, there is potentially too much investor reward, too much investor yield that's sitting, unfulfilled, that investors and the issuers bring these products to market are going to want that. And I think you're going to see that in market as well.
So in some of your casual conversations with, institutional allocators, how's their curiosity evolved, especially when it comes from chains like Solana that are more focused on throughput, user experience, and real world scalability?
Yeah, so ultimately, when I think about the investor adoption cycle, there has generally been some kind of tangible real world use case for a given digital asset that has brought in a certain part or certain type of investor. So when it's something like Solana, which may in fact have, some of the highest throughput or be one of the most, productive blockchains, when investors are evaluating it, they're certainly looking at the uptime of the network. Has it been hacked? Where did it come from? How decentralized or centralized the network is? Who's building on it? How many active wallet addresses there are? Like these are like, not just like crypto people talking about these types of metrics. It's actually, in fact, institutional investors looking at these types of activity. How dormant wallet addresses are, how active are coins moving around the network, things of that nature. Ultimately, what I think we always found is that if there are applications that are being built or taking place on a given network and the use case either dovetails or is some kind of an analogy to the types of investments that investors are used to making, whether it's energy or healthcare or financial services, payments, whatever, it's usually that corollary though, or that analogous information or situation that really ultimately gives them comfort investing in these types of protocols.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's take it to where we are today and sort of the future. So let's say Solana staking, what's next? Let's talk about the possibilities beyond. Solana's performance, the ecosystem growth has made it increasingly strong contender in the eyes of the institutions. From where you sit in the market, is Solana ready for a spot ETF?
I think so. I mean,
all right, we're done here, everyone. Thank you.
Unfortunately, that's not my decision. Obviously, a lot of the precedent around spot products in the U.S. have related to whether or not there's a surveillable market of significant size, and historically that's been looking at things like futures contracts. And so I think that combined with what appears to be obviously a much more accommodative regulatory environment, I think does bode well for Solana spot ETFs coming to market.
Okay, with that in mind, do you think if we're heading towards this future, can ETFs actually capture on-chain yield?
I don't see why not. And I think there's a couple of ways that they will. Obviously, the biggest issue around staking assets is that ETFs are highly liquid and the underlying assets are usually intended to be, in most scenarios, liquid as well. Obviously, when you're looking at staking an asset, you're looking at bonding and unbonding time. And when you don't know whether an ETF is going to be having inflows on a given day or outflows on a given day, that obviously creates problems when it comes to the underlying staking that may be occurring. So I think that some people much smarter than me are working on figuring out how to ensure that either the right quantity or percentage of the ETF's assets are staked, or that there is adjustments to the operational configurations, creation, order times, redemption order times, settlement cycles, et cetera, that can account to allow for that on-chain yield to be passed back to investors.
Yeah, so you don't have to necessarily wait for the epoch to settle when you could have the instant unstake, right?
One would think, I mean, that would be obviously ideal, right? And I think investors are increasingly attuned to the fact that that yield exists and they want access to it.
Yeah, it's a product that we're actually working on and gearing up for launch in Q3. It's an instant unstake, which is really geared towards the institutions. And one of the reasons why we're excited to be integrated with BitGo, so that those that are holding those ETFs can stake their ETFs within BitGo, the qualified custodian, and also have access to that instant unstake. Because yeah, it's a problem. Who wants to wait, an epoch or a couple days when they need that working capital?
Sure.
All right. So if you're building the next generation of crypto ETFs today, what would your ideal structure bring for a staking-based yield and compliant, accessible product?
Scott, I can't give that kind of thing away.
Well, I thought we're friends. Lisa, it's been like chicken parmesan year after year after year.
Yeah. I think what's so exciting about the ETF structure is just how many different permutations become available. So obviously we've seen spot, we've seen futures, we've started to see leverage, we've started to see the beginnings of income producing ETFs. I'd like to start seeing a little bit more in terms of active management within the crypto ETF space. I think that's an area that's not really tapped yet.
Can you dive into that a bit more?
Well, we've certainly seen that investors are willing to pay for smart, strategic trading strategies. And usually that involves active management of equities or of fixed income. And there you're usually paying a higher management fee because you're actually relying on somebody's analytical work or instincts, et cetera, as a portfolio manager to actively rebalance a portfolio. We obviously know people are doing that in crypto, typically in crypto hedge funds or other structures, but I don't think that active management approach has really been applied as rigorously to a crypto ETF.
Okay. We have about 2 minutes left. So let's give a final perspective here. What's one piece of advice you'd give to today's builders and asset managers who are working to bring the next ETF to market, especially within staking or Solana, beyond active management?
One piece of advice to give to builders.
You've seen a lot.
Yeah, I've seen a lot. Well, first and foremost, it goes back to one of my earlier comments around people. The human capital that surrounds our ecosystem and the types of people that want to work on these projects are fantastic. And so when we look at and historically looked at people as well, we try to hire people. We don't try to hire resumes. So I think human capital and having the right team around you is first and foremost the most important thing that you can do. Secondly, hire yourself some really good and really expensive lawyers. I know our industry has been probably responsible for the vast majority of all financial services and financial institution group law firm bonus pools over the last couple of years. But there's good reason for it. And I think if I had one message that I'd want this crowd and anyone listening to this to take away is just because over the last 5-6 months, we find ourselves in what is so far a more accommodative, approachable regulatory environment. I've been here before. I've been through enough winters, enough cycles, going back to when I got into crypto in 2013, 2014. Let's not let the inch or two that our industry is being given now and run away with it and take a mile. Let's use this opportunity to work proactively with our regulators to educate them. What we're doing as an industry today is not going to be the things we're doing as an industry tomorrow. We're going to continue coming up with new use cases, new ways of interacting, all kinds of new things. And that's the great thing about crypto. So let's not squander the opportunity we've been given. Let's take them on the journey with us. and let's actually use this come in and talk to us and actually work productively together environment to our advantage, so we actually can fulfill this mandate of keeping crypto a flourishing industry and hopefully with a really important home here in the US.
All right, with the last couple seconds, one wild prediction, whether it's in crypto or not crypto, anything you foresee in the coming 3-6 months, something we can't imagine.
Okay, well, again, going back to getting into crypto in 2014, we were not talking about metaverses, NFTs, ordinals, all of these, new innovations that have come out of this ecosystem. And so like, when I think about talking to you mid 2025, it's like next year, if we have this conversation, someone is going to have invented some other thing that we weren't thinking about. To me, that's what keeps me excited, keeps me jumping out of bed every day and building in the industry.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming out here. This was a real pleasure and honor being a friend of yours for a very long time now. So first time we get to do this. Thank you, Michael. And
thank you.
Have a great day.